of us succeeded in creating out of our desires any of that alluring black sand. "I suppose we can't expect to get color every time," observed Johnny disappointedly. "Let's try her again." We tried her again, and yet again, and then some more, but always with the same result. Our hands became puffed and wrinkled with constant immersion in the water, and began to feel sore from the continual stirring of the rubble. "Something's wrong," grunted Johnny into the abysmal silence in which we had been carrying on our work. "We can't expect it every time," I reminded him. "All the others seem to." "Well, maybe we've struck a blank place. Let's try somewhere else," suggested Yank. Johnny went over to speak to our neighbor, who was engaged in tossing out shovels full of earth from an excavation in which she had nearly disappeared. At Johnny's hail, he straightened his back so that his head bobbed out of the hole like a prairie dog. "No, it doesn't matter where you dig," he answered Johnny's question. "The pay dirt is everywhere." So we moved on a few hundred feet, picked another unoccupied patch, and resumed our efforts. No greater success rewarded us here. "I believe maybe we ought to go deeper," surmised Yank. "Some of these fellows are taking their dirt right off the top of the ground," objected Johnny. However, we unlimbered the pickaxe and went deeper, to the extent of 2 feet or more. It was good hard work, especially as we were all soft for it. The sun poured down on our backs with burning intensity. Our hands blistered, and the round rocks and half-cemented rubble that made the bar were not the easiest thing in the world to remove. However, we kept at it, Yank and I, having in time past been more or less accustomed to this sort of thing. Got off much easier than did poor Johnny. About 2 feet down we came to a mixed coarse sand and stones, a little finer than the top dirt. This seemed to us promising, so we resumed our washing operations. They bore the same results as had the first, which was just a hole of nothing. "We've got to hit it somewhere," said Johnny between his teeth. "Let's try another place." We scrambled rather wearily, but with a dogged determination, out of our shallow hole. Our blue-eyed, long-bearded friend was sitting on a convenient boulder near at hand, his pipe between his teeth, watching our operations. "Got any tobacco, boys?" he inquired genially. "Smoked my last until tonight, unless you lend." Yank produced a plug from which the stranger shaved some parings. "Struck the dirt?" he inquired. "No, I see you haven't." He stretched himself and arose. "You aren't washing this stuff," he cried out in amazement, as his eye took in fully what we were about. Then we learned what we might have known before, but how should we? That the gold was not to be found in any and every sort of loose earth that might happen to be lying about, but only in either a sort of blue clay or a pulverized granite. Sometimes this pay dirt would be found atop the ground. Again, the miner had to dig for it. "All the surface diggings are taken up," our friend told us, "so now you have to dig deep. It's about 4 feet down where I'm working. It'll probably be deeper up here. You'd better move back where you were." Yank stretched himself upright. "Look here," he said decidedly, "let's get a little sense into ourselves. Here our poor old horses stand with their packs on, and we no place to stay and no dinner, and we're scratching away at this bar like a lot of fool hens. There's other days coming." Johnny and I agreed with the common sense of the thing, but reluctantly. Now that we knew how, our enthusiasm surged up again. We wanted to get at it. The stranger's eyes twinkled sympathetically. "Here, boys," said he, "I know just how you feel. Come with me." He snatched up our bucket and strolled back to his own claim, where he filled the receptacle with some of the earth he had thrown out. "Go pan that," he advised us kindly. We raced to the water, and once more stirred about the heavy contents of the pail until they had floated off with the water. In the bottom lay a fine black residue, and in that residue glittered the tiny yellow particles. We had actually panned our first gold. Our friend examined it critically. "That's about a 12-cent pan," he adjudged it. Somehow, in a vague way, we had unreasonably expected millions at a twist of the wrist, and the words 12 cents had a rankly penurious sound to us. However, the miner patiently explained that a 12-cent pan was a very good one, and indubitably it was real gold. Yank, being older and less excitable, had not accompanied us to the waterside. "Well, boys," he drawled, "that 12 cents is highly satisfactory, of course, but in the meantime we've lost about $600 worth of horse and grub." Surely enough, our animals had tired of waiting for us and had moved out, packs and all. We hastily shouldered our implements. "Don't you want to keep this claim next me?" inquired our acquaintance. We stopped. "Surely," I replied, "but how do we do it?" "Just leave your pick and shovel in the hole." "Won't someone steal them?" "No." "What's to prevent?" I asked a little skeptically. "Miner's law," he replied. We almost immediately got trace of our strayed animals, as a number of men had seen them going upstream. In fact, we had no difficulty whatever in finding them, for they had simply followed up the rough stream bed between the canyon walls until it had opened up to a gentler slope and a hanging garden of grass and flowers. Here they had turned aside and were feeding. We caught them, and were just heading them back when Yank stopped short. "What's the matter with this here?" he inquired. "Here's feed and water near, and it ain't so very far back to the diggings." We looked about us for the first time with seeing eyes. The little upsloping meadow was blue and dull red with flowers. Below us the stream brawled foam flecked among the black rocks. The high hills rose up to meet the sky, and on our backs, across the way, the pines stood thick serried. Far up in the blue heavens some birds were circling slowly. Somehow the leisurely swing of these unhastening birds struck from us the feverish hurry that had lately filled our souls. We drew deep breaths, and for the first time the great peace and majesty of these California mountains cooled our spirits. "I think it's a bully place, Yank," said Johnny soberly, "and that little bench up above us looks flat." We clambered across the slant of the flower-spangled meadow to the bench just within the fringe of the pines. It proved to be flat, and from the edge of it down the hill seeped a little spring marked by the feathery bracken. We entered a cool green place, peopled with shadows and the rare, considered notes of soft-voiced birds. Just over our threshold, as it were, was the sunlit, chirpy, buzzing, bright-colored, busy world. Overhead a wind of many voices hummed through the pine tops. The golden sunlight flooded the mountains opposite, flashed from the stream, lay languorous on the meadow. Long bars of it slanted through an unguessed gap in the hills behind us to touch with magic the very tops of the trees over our heads. The sheen of the precious metal was over the land. End of